Hi, welcome back to Biology Leap Review on Unit 3, Evolution. And so in our previous videos for Unit 3, we talked about how the body and all the systems in the body work together to maintain balance and homeostasis. And then we went into the things that cause our body to get out of homeostasis, which we talked about bacteria and viruses and how they reproduce. And then we kind of moved into the part of evolution that we can see on a microscopic scale. We can see evolution occurring with bacteria as they become antibiotic resistant. And so that led us into talking about evolution on a larger scale. So we can see how a bacterial population can evolve over time because of the variation in the population, and that some of the variations in that population would survive better in the presence of antibiotics. And so that could lead to a change in that population. And so we can apply that, what we learned about bacteria, to larger organisms. And the scientist that first proposed this theory of organisms changing over time was Charles Darwin. And he developed the theory of evolution, which explains how things change over time or evolve. So based on his findings on the Galapagos Islands and elsewhere, Darwin said that all living things are descended with modifications from a common ancestor. And so he traveled all over the globe on a ship called the HMS Beagle. And he studied the different life forms on the Galapagos Islands, and he saw how they were similar in some ways with just slight modifications that tended to allow them to survive better in whatever environment they found themselves. So what does descent with modification mean? Well, scientists believe that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old, and that the first living cells were very similar to bacteria, and they were believed to have appeared on the Earth about 3.5 billion years ago. And so Darwin's theory says that all living things on Earth have ancestors of ancient organisms from the past, and that this ancient organism is a common ancestor for all living things. So he believed that small changes caused by DNA mutations or from the rearrangement of DNA during meiosis, all these small changes every generation for billions of years is what led to the different organisms branching off into new species. And so he drew this tree of life, which shows how the different organisms are related to a common ancestor. So Darwin proposed that this descent with modification occurred through the process of natural selection. And natural selection is the process by which organisms with variations most suited to their environment survive and leave more offspring. So this applied to our bacterial population. We can make that comparison, the natural selection, when the bacteria population was the antibiotics were introduced, that there were certain variations in the bacteria that let some of them survive when the antibiotics were introduced. And so those that survived, which in our example were the purple ones with just the 3 pore openings, they were able to reproduce. And so we're going to take that idea and apply it to larger organisms, not just bacteria. So how does natural selection work? There is a struggle for existence. When more individuals are born than can actually survive in a particular environment, there is competition. Competition for food, for space, for whatever resources that those organisms need to survive. And Darwin wanted to know which individuals would come out on top. So he learned that there was variation in populations of organisms, and that some variations tended to be better suited for certain environments. So like in our bacteria, the variation of bacteria that only had 3 pores was better suited for an environment full of antibiotics, which were designed to kill the bacteria. So a variation can be an adaptation. And so an adaptation is a heritable characteristic. So that means it is passed down from parents to offspring that increases an organism's ability to survive in a certain environment. So in those individuals that are well adapted to their environment can survive, and they will reproduce. And so this Yeti crab is a good example of an adaptation that helps it to survive in its environment, because it gives it camouflage and allows it to blend in so it can survive better. So continuing with how natural selection works, you've all heard of the phrase survival of the fittest. Well, what that means is that an organism's fitness determines how well it survives and subsequently reproduces in that environment. If an organism is well adapted to its environment and successfully reproduces, it has a high fitness. Whereas if an organism is not well adapted and does not reproduce successfully, it has low fitness. Over time, the traits of the well-adapted individuals become the more common. This is now how natural selection, picture it in your mind. So you've got a grasshopper here, okay? And you see that the grasshopper is laying eggs. Well, this particular grasshopper is green, okay? But you can see you've got this population of grasshoppers where there is variation. There are some grasshoppers that are yellow and some grasshoppers that are green. Okay, so if a green grasshopper lays eggs, then eggs will hatch out and be yellow grasshoppers. Okay, so since the environment is mostly green, we got green grass here, you can see how predators would be more likely to eat these yellow grasshoppers, because the green grasshoppers have better camouflage in this particular environment. So the yellow grasshoppers do not blend in as well. They're easier for the predators, the birds, to see, so they get eaten. So mostly green grasshoppers are left to reproduce. And so over time, over many generations, almost all of the grasshoppers are going to end up being green. So this is how natural selection works. Nature has selected for the green grasshoppers because they have the highest fitness and they are better suited for their environment. Therefore, they survive, reproduce, and make more green grasshoppers. Okay, so that is natural selection in a nutshell. When we come back, we will talk about some of the evidence for evolution and how we know that organisms have changed over time. Thank you for your attention.